What's up, bosses? Welcome to About Her Business, the podcast where we leave all the gossip at the door and get straight down to business. I'm your host, Jonte, and today we have a special treat. We have my good friend and owner of Sacred Wealth Company, Miss Jennifer Barnes, in the building. Now, Miss Barnes wears a multitude of hats, from being an educator to an entrepreneur to a mother, all the way down to being a financial professional. She's also the proud host of Sacred Her podcast, which allows women to come on and tell their stories in their own personal way. And we're putting her in the hot seat today on what she means business. So, ladies, grab your cup and pads and let's get down to it. The meeting is now in session. Welcome, Ms. Barnes.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, John Jay. Love the
Th-
introduction.
Thank you for being here. I'm super excited. You ready to get started?
I'm ready.
Perfect, perfect. So your approach, it centers around on a holistic wealth ecosystem that is rooted in emotional safety, financial clarity, and legacy building. What
Mhm.
personal or professional experiences led you to redefine wealth in this way?
So, really, what happened after my second divorce led me to redefine what wealth is. I've always wanted to have the house, the white picket fence, children, and all that. However, after divorce, I had to relearn how to navigate my finances along with emotional safety because it was a toxic environment towards the end. And so that financial responsibility had to do with paying bills, working, providing, doing everything that needed to be done. And so with that emotional part of navigating stress, survival, and, I had 3 babies under the age of 5 during my divorce that, was overwhelming, like, how am I gonna take care of them? How am I gonna work? And so as a teacher, single mother, and now financial professional, I saw firsthand that money decisions are rarely just logical. It's deeply emotional and often tied to the sense of safety and worthiness and identity. So there's so many different parts that I was navigating, especially that emotional piece of feeling safe with money, feeling safe with my decision versus being in a survival mode and making these decisions based off of fear or shame or whatever feelings that was coming up.
Thank you for sharing. And you made a great point there, because as women, when we're going through a divorce or just being a single mother, we often do go into survival mode. So let's talk about that for a second. When did you first recognize that traditional financial strategies was missing something essential?
Well, I started noticing it just firsthand on myself of the situation I was in. And even like with talking with friends, I recognized that even though we're all intelligent women and totally capable, there were still feelings that may have been taught to us or through experience that we started to feel anxious, ashamed, or overwhelmed around money, right? And there weren't, we think like when it comes to money, you need to be disciplined, but really, traditional financial advice is really like invest here, save here, cut spending here, but it doesn't really ask the deeper question of, do I feel safe holding this money? Or this idea of what was probably taught to us that money doesn't grow on trees. So there's that idea of scarcity that's embedded in us, even though we may not be fully aware consciously about it. And so it's like asking ourselves also, there's that other part where it's like asking ourselves, do we trust ourselves and our decisions probably from past mistakes where we were like, oh, I did this wrong. So we push it away until we have to deal with it.
Mhm. As you were talking, you were mentioning several different financial strategies. So let's get into that a little bit. You integrate financial strategy with nervous system regulation and identity repair, which are really common in the financial world. Can you actually walk us through how those three elements intersect in your work?
Yes, absolutely. So in my work, like there's that main three elements, there's so much more to it, but there's the financial strategies, right? This is something that we learn, we hear about, especially as we grow up. We don't really hear it in schools, but it's how do we protect our finances, savings, especially retirement planning. And a lot of us who do have children, there's that legacy structure and how do we structure all that. However, there's that other part with nervous system regulation. And for those of us who've been through trauma or just that idea behind money, this part, it creates an internal capacity to hold this structure. And so what this nervous system is, it's the money, the idea like, oh, feeling pressure or that the situation's dangerous or and I say danger like in our body, we feel like, oh my gosh, like there's like this panic, right? When we're making decisions, or maybe you're struggling with your finances and you're in debt and you feel like, oh my gosh, how am I going to get out of it? So there's that danger feeling. And it's also instability, right? So this is like, how do I regulate this? How can I look at this and feel safe in my money situation? And for me, it's like, come back to breath, right? Come back to breath. You're still here, and all these things can be fixed. It's money after all, right? But it's also with that component of identity repair, is asking a deeper layer of the subconscious belief of thinking I'm bad with money or wealth isn't for people like me or I'm broke. Our words, what kind of words are we identifying with? And so we're looking at all these three elements in when we're looking at our money story. And so by aligning, getting into alignment, we're able to have the strategy, overcome this identity repair of like, I'm gonna be broke, I'm broke, right? And shifting that and then learning to feel safe with the situation that you're in. So we're creating wealth that is not just built, but it's sustained because there's this internal part of, you know, our feelings and our emotional part, which as women, we tend to be more emotional, right? In our decision making, and our ideas, our brain, we like overthink things. And so it's really coming back to truth and working with these three elements to guide us and to move us into a place where, yes, I can. Yes, I will. And I will overcome this. And I am moving towards my goals and my dreams of the lifestyle that I truly.
Oh, I love that. And just to emphasize on nervous system regulation for a second, how does that show up in money behaviors for women?
Good question. And we probably like do it more often than we think. And pretty much it can trigger anxiety. Um like, oh, I can't deal with this right now, for some of us, like depending on like how much debt we have, that causes a huge anxiety within us. And other ways it can show up is by overworking, hustling, which constantly equates to rest with financial danger. Sometimes it shows up in impulsive spending or overgiving, feeling of guilt when receiving money. It also can be with fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. So we may just not do anything with our money and not deal with it and sweep it under the rug. And that's not a great decision to do because you can call your creditors to work with you. It can show up in various ways, such as those.
Oh, you hit so many great points just then. I can't tell you before I started learning how to regulate my nervous system, how many of those traits I carried myself from being in fright, flight, or freeze mode.
Yep.
And that in itself, a lot of people don't realize that they're going through those emotional blocks. So let's talk about that for a second. In your experience with emotional blocks with women, what are they facing, especially when stepping into wealth building conversations?
In wealth building conversations, hmm, I think one of the biggest emotional blocks is shame, feeling of selfishness, and fear. I feel like with women, we're taught like, you need to take care of your children. You can't be having this job or you shouldn't be working this much. You need to put your children first. They need to be in sports. They need to do this. And so we're kind of taught like, oh, taking care of ourselves is isn't good because then we're looked at as selfish. So there's different emotional blocks can block our abundance, right? Our wealth building because we think we're not deserving of it.
And speaking of wealth building, let's talk about legacy for a second. It is central to your mission. Beyond financial inheritance, what does legacy mean to you?
Legacy is about creating a foundation for future generations. And for me, I have three children. So as I see it, when we're healing our relationship with money, we are interrupting these generational patterns, from our parents or grandparents, perhaps. And we're interrupting it from the scarcity, the fear, and that silence around finances. And so with this, we can empower our generations moving forward, educate them, and give them that resources needed so that they're well prepared and more stable in their future. So that's how I look at when I think of my legacy of preparing my children so that they can be better with their relationship with money, because there's also that emotional part of it, and trust themselves that they can make good decisions with it. So it's more than just the money, but how you function as a mindful and aware adult.
I totally agree with that. And speaking of legacy, you're currently building a amazing podcast. I was just recently a guest on her podcast, Sacred Herstory. You guys have to tune in. It is amazing. You give women an opportunity to come on and share their untold stories. Why did you feel that this platform was needed?
Well, honestly, it started innocently enough where, as an educator, we always hear about history, his story, his version of their truth, right? But we don't really hear about the woman's story. And so for me, I was like, "Well, Sacred Her." That kind of came out by accident too. I was in the middle of a talk and it just kind of came through. And it just kind of evolved. And it became this place where I just wanted to honor every woman's story, where wherever she's at, it doesn't need to be perfect, but so that she's seen and heard. It's more than just, oh, give me the good parts, but there's also the messy. There's also the struggles and the pain behind where they are at this moment in their success story. And that I wanted this space for it. And now where Secret Her is going, it's there's a couple of other stories interwoven, still about women, still about the messy, still about the sacred journey of each of us, still about truth, healing, evolution, and power. But this way, I'm adding more about more where I'm collaborating with a dear sister of mine, which we call Juicy and True. And this is just real conversation about real stuff going on or what we're going through. And then there's that other component where I'm going to share more about the sacred wealth and honoring our journey as we journey into our wealthful life, right? Our wealth journey, so to speak. And so I really wanted to talk more about that as well, or just share a little bit more about that in Sacred Her Story, because it's still part of this whole evolution of things of the journey of women and where we are. So
Oh, it is good. I mean, every episode I've heard it has inspired me in some way, shape, or form. And even with the new podcast that is coming out, Juicy and True, it is good, y'all. They just released the episode this week. So if you have not tuned in, please go to Sacred Her so you guys can see it. Now, I want you to, if you can, share
mhm.
a story from a woman who inspired you.
A woman who inspired me. Ooh, that's a good question. There's several women who inspired me, but really it wasn't so much as a that it was them who inspired me, but it's me who wanted something more and something better. And so it's through my own healing journey where I was able to look at several different women and go, you know what? I like that. I like what she's doing. How do I incorporate that, or how do I learn that? And so I can't really say that there's just been one person who inspired me, but several women, not always, but it was just looking at their own individual story of where they are, their confidence, what they're building, how they are with their relationships, with their relationship with their children, the relationship with their partner, you know, um, because sometimes we just go through these weird places in life. I've been divorced twice, and so not a lot of people can relate to me on that level, but I think it's where I related and was inspired is that they said yes to themselves. And so I wanted to say yes to more of what it is I wanted to do, what it is I wanted to experience, and what it is I wanted to see. So, yeah.
I
You
love that. And because if I was asked the same question, I probably couldn't pick a woman either because you just never know who can inspire you, who is going to be that inspiration for you. Speaking of
Right.
inspiration, with you being an entrepreneur, let's get some advice for our audience out there. For entrepreneurs that are currently scaling their businesses, what foundational financial shifts should they prioritize to avoid burnout and long-term sustainability?
For me, I'm still in this development of I'm new to the entrepreneur space. However, I would say to, with that whole nervous system regulation is to always breathe. Um, Things don't always go perfect. Things that you plan may not go as smoothly as you think it would, but you always can come back to breath. And for me, there's this whole other part of honoring your feelings, honoring your truth, and it's gonna be okay. Sure, it gets frustrating, but it's part of the process and you'll get there eventually, right? As long as you don't quit. So that's advice I would give. Being that I'm new to this space and my challenges, it's been like, yeah, I'm frustrated. I get worked up, there's this whole messy part, and my partner, he gets to hear a bulk of my drama and craziness. But yet there's that part after you breathe and you come back to it's the you come back to why are you doing this? Your why.
I love that because you just have to learn to keep going because as long as you don't give up, you will eventually reach those goals in life, whether it's to build franchises or become a millionaire. As long as you don't quit, you will eventually get there. For women who are listening right now, who may want to begin building wealth that is aligned rather than fear driven, what is the first step they could take right now?
First step, I always say to breathe. Breathe, come back, drop down into the space. But really is first step awareness. Awareness of your financial situation. Where are you at? What does it look like? Look at where you are financially, your income, your expenses, your savings, if you have any protection. This is that life insurance component to ensure that if something were to happen, like for me as a single parent, that was one of my biggest things. Like my kids' opportunity, if I was not here, what would happen? So from there, you begin asking a new question like, what would wealth look like to me? How does it feel? Do I feel safe? Do I feel aligned? Does this feel good in my body? Does it feel good in my heart? Does it feel good mentally? So there's all these different aspects of how is it moving in our body? And that's more of the awareness, but really taking a good look no matter how scary it is, at where you are financially. And that would be like the first couple steps. And that shift can open doors to help you with setting more intentional decisions as you move forward because it looks different for all of us. But the biggest thing is we don't look honestly at the big picture. And that's sometimes where we just need to start. Most often is where we need to start. Then we can move forward. Because if you can't pay the minimum, you can call the creditors and say, "Hey, this is my circumstances," especially after something devastating, like someone like a death in the family or a divorce, or the breadwinner in the house, passes on. Then what's going to happen? So it's really taking a good look financially of your circumstance, of the situation when you're ready and ask these questions. How does this feel? Or where do I need to communicate? Or who do I need to communicate with?
Absolutely. And you hit once again on several major key points. So, ladies, I hope you caught every single one of those tips. Now, sadly, our time has come to a close with Miss Barnes, but before we leave, we always leave with a legacy. And I give you a couple of minutes to think about this. But when we think back on your work and your impact years from now, how do you want people to remember you?
I've thought about this, where it's like, well, I want to be seen and heard. I want to be seen as someone who helps people, but I think when it really comes down to it, it's how am I remembered by my children? Am I that strong mother, the one who supported them, the one that's most important, love them, and for everyone, it's just, as someone who helped women, people return to themselves, um, for even my children, that they know their power, you know, know they're sovereign, and this knowing that they matter, that their voice matter, their dreams matter, who they are matter, their presence holds this frequency that makes them unique to everyone else. And so therefore we are all special here. So
Absolutely. And we talked several times about how our babies are our biggest influences to keep going and why we actually really do this. So thank you for sharing. Sadly, today's episode has come to a close, but before we leave, we want to make sure that we get all of Miss Barnes' information. Let us know how we can sign up for Sacred Web Company. Let us know what Sacred Her podcast is. Let us know all the details.
thank you for this opportunity as well. So you can find me at www.jenniferNatasia.com, JenniferNatasia. And I have a 4-week program in there. There's some hypnosis as well in there. If you're interested in that, I'm also a hypnotherapist that I include in my coaching. So on my website, it has all that information there. You can find it. You can contact me as well. For Sacred Her Story podcast, you can find me on Spotify, Sacred Her Story, and on YouTube. And I'm currently getting it onto Apple. So bear with me, but it's getting there. So those are the different places you can find Sacred Her Story podcast, and you can find me on my website.
Absolutely. And any last words before we adjourn today's Meet Miss Barnes?
I thank you for this opportunity, and for your audience, you matter.
Thank you, and thank you for being here again, my great friend, the Jennifer Barnes, y'all. And with that, today's meeting is now adjourned. Thanks again to my great friend Jennifer Barnes, Sacred Web Company, for coming on and sharing all of her valuable insights. Also, be sure to subscribe to About Her Business wherever you receive your podcast so you never miss an upload. Leave me some comments down in that comment section on which industry you think I should interview next. Until next time, keep those goals tight, those circles tighter, and those bank accounts growing.